how do you set your priorities? Anita.
Oh, boy. So I'm going to first disclose right up front, I'm a single mom, 2 girls, one's 13, one's 7, and my oldest child has special needs. So it's really difficult to balance. And, if anyone tells you like, oh, you can have it all, I think it was once I was watching Oprah and they were talking about this whole work-life balance. And somebody said, you can't necessarily have it all at once. And I think that's really what's important. And a lot of it as women, it's about getting rid of and letting go of the guilt that you carry around, because you can't be everything to everyone all the time, or you will drown. You will forget yourself, you will lose yourself. And it's really, really important to keep that in mind. So sometimes I'm the best mother, and sometimes I'm the best employee, and sometimes I'm the best partner, and sometimes I'm the best friend, but I can't be that all the time. And I think when setting priorities, it does come down to a little bit of firefighting, and you really have to think about short-term, mid-term, and long-term, and plan that way, because realistically, everything's going to be a priority at some point in your life when you're trying to manage all of these things, and you can't do it. So anybody that tells you that you can do it all at once, they're lying. They're lying.
And so, Andrea, when it comes to priority setting, how do you decide? So let's use Sheryl Sandberg for an example. Okay, so Sheryl Sandberg had a husband who stayed at home and was in charge of child rearing. Then we all know, sadly, what happened to him. So all of a sudden, Sheryl Sandberg had to completely change her lifestyle, change her priorities, how she functioned. So, Andrea, as a leader in an executive position, how do you handle crises, and how do you set the priorities when you're planning on doing one thing, but something has come up that needs your attention?
So I don't think there's any easy way, and usually it's, okay, my kid's sick, and I have to go present to some huge population, you know what? But then you have to take a step back, and my mentor, the male that had been my mentor for many years, he always said, "Don't panic." I'd come in, I'd freak out. He's like, "Don't panic, don't panic. There's always a solution. You just have to make sure you understand what's the most important right now, and you just have to take that step back and understand." And for me, and anybody who has kids, it's always your kids first, right? So, and the thing you have to get to is everybody understands that. Most everybody either has kids or nephews or nieces, and if somebody's sick, all you have to say is, I can't. The other piece is having backup, having a support system where somebody can back you up in that presentation, that meeting, that whatever you're missing. But you have to, it's one of those crisis management, 101, okay, what is that most important thing? And you've got to be okay with the decision. It's like, you have to evaluate that and move on, no regrets. That's kind of my big thing is, and if you make too many plans going forward, you're going to regret too many things looking back, right? So making sure that, okay, I'm okay with this decision and I'm okay with what happens. And so to relate that, so I have 2 boys, 15 and just turned 12. And, I went part-time. I worked part-time for 8 years. Actually, I've had an alternative work schedule for 15. I took time off and, like you said, trying to jump back in. But when I did that, I made that decision, my family's more important, right? So back 15 years ago, it wasn't like you could just say, okay, that's my priority, GE's going to support me, and I'm going to be an executive. It's kind of like, okay, I'm putting my career on hold, and actually Nancy was spoke before, paved the way, right? Lots of women went part-time, but it was, okay, put my career on hold. And I made that decision, and it was no looking back. That's my decision. I've come out of that great. I was recognized for the work that I had done. I was promoted since then. But it was that, okay, I'm okay going forward. So that priority, and then, you get to work, right? And I got this priority versus that. And it's just really understanding what's most important on the outcomes when you're trying to make those decisions, because we're all going to balance the work family, but then you have, okay, well, I've got this vice president needing me to be here and that vice president needing me to be there. Well, crap, what do I do, right? And then it was a week and a half ago, I was supposed to fly to Cincinnati, and I'm stuck in the tunnel in Sumner and missing my flight and not able to get there, right? What do you do? And you lean on your network, you lean on the people that can help you, and it all worked out, presented via telepresence. And that's the other thing that I'll add, and I know I'm going on too long, is you just calm down, take a step, don't panic. It will work out. And you kind of get to these things where it's like, oh my God, I'm not going to make it. I can't do this. And you get to the other side, and it's like, okay, I'm still alive. Nobody's dead. It's good. Okay. So,
thank you, Andrea. So, Clem, we've heard Anita and Andrea reference family. And for our younger members here who may not have children, or for women who are maybe planning on having children, I'm sure that this comes up all the time before you're embarking on your career, the whole work-life balance. And so, Clem, I want to ask you, as a male, the priority setting that we just heard from two of our esteemed leaders, are they similar to what your priority setting thought processes are?
Certainly. Similar, but by definition, different. And biology is biology. And women have to deal with a question that men do not have to deal with. That's just reality. And so as a male, I can't empathize. All I can do is support. And I think the comment that you made, I think, is the really important one, was or is society understanding that a kid being sick is no different than being stuck in the Sumner Tunnel, and it's going to work out, and I think, I'm of a transitional generation that it was only 1 in 7 women that went through engineering school when I went through engineering school, but there were 1 in 7. I also have 4 sisters. I have 4 brothers too, but I have 4 very, very strong professional sisters, of which our moderator knows one of them pretty well. So I grew up around a model that was that. To be open, my daughter is now a young engineer working for GE at this point. My son is still in college. Now, my wife surprised me dramatically 20 years ago and she was a professional, and she was the director of public libraries and had been for 20 years, and she made the choice you made. She said, I want to be home for my daughter. And so she didn't go back until Matt, our son, was capable of being a little bit more on his own. It's not clear he still is, but that's a separate issue. So she went back to work at that point in time and came back in. As a male, I have to recognize that's a choice you are making. It's never bothered me. I understand, and accept is the wrong word, but I understand society does what society does, and boys are taught to be, quote, the breadwinner, et cetera. One thing I think that has changed really dramatically between our father's generation and our mother's generation and current is it's pretty hard to be part of the middle class without being a dual income family at this point in time. So that by definition, any male that's going to have, or for that matter, couples of any type, you've got to be supportive of the other one. And I think that's the key, is how do you set priorities, is recognize the family is something in there. Now, my wife might say I was not as good as I could have been, that, I don't know. She's not here. I'll let her, make that decision. I have tried very hard to be an example. And I think and believe that what we have to do is we have to change society. and that's where the real issue comes down.
But Clem, if I may, going with the decision. So again, Andrea and Anita went right to the family and the children. And so when you at work are making, well, your children are in college now, but let's go back a little. Was that part of your professional decision-making process?
Sometimes. Probably it was not all the time.
And so my question to the panelists would be, how much of that difference in the priorities impacts the pathway to leadership?
Difference in priorities
of having to consider the work-life balance, the friends, versus not. Is that just an acceptable truth or not? Does it matter? I mean, I think that's the grain of what I'd like to suss out. Does it matter if women have to shift different priorities? And probably a longer list of priorities.
Or some of us don't.
Right.
I have 2 kids. I'm also the perfect 1950s dad. I have a full-time stay-at-home husband. He has been home for, it'll be 20 years in March. And I have very rarely had to make the decision about work versus kids because he has been there 100% full-time to pick up the anything I drop. This past year, my now 19-year-old son, who is a freshman in college, took a gap year and worked for me. And I spent more time with him in the past year, he was my constant companion, than I probably have the rest of his entire life. A lot of moms look at me like I've got 2 heads and antenna or something, but we made a decision as a couple early on that we didn't feel that both of us could have a career without having someone else to raise our kids. Also doesn't hurt that my husband is a musician, and if we were relying upon his salary, we'd probably be living in a van somewhere. I was significantly more advanced in my career. I was an executive with large enterprise software companies, and he was customer service at a bank. So some of the decision was made for us, but it also came down to our innate personalities as well. I was very career focused. Actually, before I met my husband, I had never even imagined having children. And he wanted children, and when I was with him, I also wanted children, and I love my boys, and we get along great, and we do things together that are probably not the traditional mom-son things. I just took my younger son to the Ig Nobel Awards last week. We do scientific things because I feel it's my responsibility to actually expose them to work-related stuff and STEM-related stuff because my husband doesn't. He takes them to the museum and to concerts and things like that. So we have almost completely flip-flopped back to 1950s. So a little bit different perspective. And I have literally, I can't even think of a time, oh, actually I can. I can think of one time where I had to make a decision, and my older son at the time had chicken pox, and I was on my way to Japan. And unfortunately, I discovered when I landed in Japan that not only did my son have chicken pox, my husband had, what's the adult version of chicken pox?
Oh, shingles.
Shingles, yes. I called in my mother-in-law. You've got to go in and save the day because I'm in Japan. So I could have turned around, come back home, but I figured, I figured I'm very replaceable. So my mother-in-law raised my husband. I figured she wouldn't kill off the next generation too.
Well, I guess that leads me to thinking, have we seen a shift in women who are the primary breadwinners in the companies who have stay-at-home husbands?
So I'm kind of halfway between that. So I'm definitely the primary breadwinner, and actually my husband was laid off and just spent 2 years out of work. So he became that, but he's not that at the core. So he struggled for 2 years being that stay-at-home dad. Luckily, the kids were older at that point, so he could kind of deal a little bit more. But he was not in his happy little place. And so I think the biggest thing, back to the double income thing, which Clem mentioned, is, you kind of have to be there to do what you want. And my husband and I and kids actually are big bicycle racers, and so we need to make a lot of money to buy a lot of bikes. So we have priorities, right? So exactly. But the biggest thing came when, I was the career person, and he wanted a career, but I wanted to excel. And so I have, but he always wanted to have that job. And we got to the point where we had kids, and then it became an issue. And so he's thinking, well, yeah, but I have to go to work. I'm like, but so do I, and the kid's sick. Why is it me that has to stay home? So that feeling is certainly still there. I think the biggest thing I did was when the kids were, I would go to my hairdresser, and which, as you can tell, doesn't take long. And so we would bitch and moan about about the husbands, and and she said, all right, I want you to go home, and I'm gonna do the same thing. We're gonna list out all of the things that we do, just me. And all of the things that he does, just him. And he took out the trash, and it was the only thing that just he did, right? So I did the doctor's appointments, I did the dentist, I did all of this stuff. And I think the biggest thing, which I think Anita should jump in after this, is ask for help. That is the biggest thing. And it took me a long time to write that and actually bring it up to him, because I was so mad at him for making me do it all. I'm working full-time, I have the bigger job, and yet I'm still the one that has to make the dentist appointment, bring them, figure it out, call the parents. Well, did you call somebody? If you can't be here, then did you call somebody? Well, why can't you? So I think that's the biggest thing. So we talked about leaning on your network at work. It's leaning on your network and being okay with asking the neighbor to take the kid early in the morning to get him on the bus. My husband won't do that still, right? And so, but you have to be able to ask for help.
So I think it was you, Andrea, that said the support network is what's key, and it's so true. And around career decisions, so I have made certain career decisions around where I thought my support network would be. So there were relocation opportunities denied, because if you're going to move to an area where you know no one, be prepared, because that means how effective you are at work is going to suffer. Your neighbors, your parents, if they're still alive and they're healthy and they can help, that's a blessing. So, you have siblings in the area. If you move away from that and you take a family with you, it's going to be hard. It's going to be really hard. And trust me, as someone who's used multiple nannies over the years, it's not easy. You think, oh, well, I'll just get a nanny or an au pair. But, those are relationships. And those people aren't just, people that you're hiring. They're taking care of your children, and you're dealing with them. They become part of your family. And if it doesn't fit, and not because they're not good people, but you just need to have that fit. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and you're on to the next person. And while you're waiting for the next nanny to come in the house, that's 4 weeks where you're working from home and you're trying to, get the kids to the doctor's appointments. Oh, and you're on a conference call at the same time. Sure, go ahead. Travel's approved. And you're trying to juggle all of that. So, I know that I definitely made career decisions based upon, how far my opportunity was going to take me away from my support system. And I think that's just a reality of what you're going to need to confront. But I think it's really important to keep that in mind.